All right, in this video, we're going to be walking through the process of building onto our base little vendor stand here. So this is for a customer that ordered our basic vendor stand. So it's 36 inches tall. This countertop here is 35 inches wide and it's 22 inches deep, the top is. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a little auxiliary display area that this could mount to the right or to the left of the main unit. Now the customer didn't order this, but we're going to go ahead and build it out and show it to them. I build a lot of these, but this is a new idea that I had, and you know, sometimes we got to have different things that we can upsell. So if I have it all set up for them, now this particular one is going to get stained, so I'll have this auxiliary table section here all stained up to match the main unit. Obviously they did not elect for the topper. We have this roof topper, and then we also have a little different style topper. It's just a sign topper, but they didn't want any type of top to their particular unit. So anyhow, we're going to walk through the process of building this. So the first thing that we're going to do in our construction process is we're going to build our top, which is 35 inches. Now the main top, as you can see here, is 4 boards deep. This top is going to be 3 boards deep. And then the bottom here, so this is going to be 35, and down here is going to be 31 and a half, the lower shelf, and it's 3 deep as well. Now, as another option for you, you can build almost an identical unit. Turn this around here, and this would be a little desk. So instead of that bottom shelf, we do have a support board going over there that supports our leg. That's the purpose of that board. But then on the back side, we could have a normal size chair or stool, because this auxiliary top is going to be at 30 inches, which is standard desk height. So we could show them the desk option, but in this particular case, I know that this particular customer is probably going to prefer some additional display area. So you have this lower shelf for display area and this top shelf for either work area or display area. So that's what we're going to be building. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and cut our fence pickets to make our 2 shelves. So we need 3 pieces at 35 and we need 3 pieces at 31 and a half. So we're going to go ahead and get those cut up, and then we're going to make our top and make our shelf, and then we'll talk about how we're going to attach our shelf to our main unit, and then how these legs are going to be built and how they're going to work just exactly. All right, we do have our bottom shelf complete, but do not do what I did. So what I should have done, and I kind of forgot about this, what I should have done is on the end here, instead of going with the 1 3/4 piece like we would normally do, we want to go ahead and do a full fence picket wide to hold these boards together on each end. And then we could do 1 3/4 between. And the reason for that is we have to drill some bolts in our shelf, and so we need a wide board here. So I would just go ahead and use a full fence picket wide instead of the 1 3/4 cleats. So what I did, I just went ahead and doubled up, but when we go to put in our bolts, and you'll see that here how this all gets put together, we'll just have to be mindful of all of our screws and staple locations and things like that. So when I do my top, I'm going to do a full fence picket wide, 1 3/4, and then a full fence picket here in the middle to hold those boards together. So I'll go ahead and do that. So it's basically going to look just like this, just a bit longer. This one's 31 and a half overall width, and our top is going to be 35. So this is how our lower shelf should have looked. So we have a full fence picket wide holding those 3 boards together, full fence picket wide holding those, 1 3/4 cleat, and then the one in the middle. Okay. So I'll go ahead and give those a nice good sand, a little bit of round over on the edges, and then we'll take a look at what we need to do to make our legs. All right, that's what our finished auxiliary top looks like. Okay, so we've just kind of rounded over the edges just a bit and smoothed out the top just a little bit. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on making our legs. But our legs on this particular unit is gonna have to be a special dimension because I know what the height is of our unit, but we also have our casters. So I'm gonna have to probably lay this down, get a better true dimension of what that is so I know how tall my legs have to be over here. So that's what I'm gonna do next, is figure out exactly how tall my legs need to be. All right, so the dimension we're looking for is from the very top of our unit down to the bottom of our caster, which in my case is 35 1/4, but I have to take off the thickness of this also, which is 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so that is so basically if this is 35 1/4 and I need to take off 5/8 of an inch, then that's going to leave us 34 7/8 for the overall height of our leg. All right, now if we come over here and look at our leg, we have 1.5 inch bottom cleat, 1.5 inch top cleat. So remember I said 34 7/8, but we're going to have to subtract 3 from that. So that will give us 31 7/8 for our actual 2 leg pieces here. And then these bottom pieces, I'll have to figure out what the dimension is for the depth there. All right, so I double checked the computer and this is 12.5 inches. And the legs are gonna be set back from that front edge 1.5 inches, okay? And then up top here, this top is 16.5. The legs are 12.5, and that's gonna give us a 2 inch. So we're gonna come in 2 inches from the end, and we're gonna come back, front and back 2 inches as well. I know none of that probably made sense, but it will once we get there. So, once again, the bottom pieces are 12.5. These pieces are 31 7/8. I am gonna bust out my calculator and double check that dimension, make sure I'm thinking properly. But I will go ahead and make that leg assembly. See, I'm glad I came and busted out the calculator. So no, these are not 31 7/8, they're 31 5/8. Okay, so just a little bit off, not too big a deal. So I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can find some scrap material to get all those cut out with. I'm pretty sure I've got plenty of scrap laying around. We're gonna use treated wood for all this because everything else has been treated. So we're gonna use treated wood and we'll find some scraps. I'll sacrifice a 2x6 if I have to. Go ahead and get those cut up. So I had a scrap piece of 2x8 and I went ahead and ripped down some 1.5 inch boards from. So now we're going to cut these to 12.5 and we are going to cut these to 31 5/8. So I need 2 pieces that are 31 5/8 and then I need 2 pieces that are 12.5. This is why we have plans, because even sometimes I screw up. As I'm cutting my 31 5/8 legs, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, those can't be 31 5/8 because the whole countertop is supposed to be 30 inches from the ground. So what am I thinking? Clearly I wasn't. So let's go back to the drawing board. So over here, what we need to do is figure out this dimension from the bottom of our caster to the bottom edge of our counter here. And that happens to be 2 1/4 inches. Okay, then we're going to measure up 30 but then we're going to subtract the thickness of our counter. Well, we know the thickness of our counter is 2 fence pickets, so that's 1 1/4 inches, 5/8 and 5/8. Okay, so that's going to get us to the bottom of this. So basically what we have to do now, I did it, is we have to, don't even need that. So we're going to subtract 2 1/4 from 30, and then we're going to subtract 1 1/4 for our top, and that will give us the dimension we need for the overall leg. And then we're going to deduct 1 1/2 for the bottom, 1 1/2 for the top, and that will give us our leg. Did that make any sense? So 30 minus 2 1/4 minus 1 1/4 gives us the overall height minus 3. Okay, so let me go do the math and we'll figure out what those are really supposed to be. So I did the math, and that overall leg should be 26.5 inches. Overall height. And then we subtract 3, which would give us 23.5 inches is what our leg's supposed to be. Okay, so then we'll go ahead and cut those. So 23.5, 12.5 pieces, and we're good to go. All right, so there is our leg assembly, and that should work out just perfectly. And now what we're going to go ahead and do is attach the leg assembly to our tabletop. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to make this hinge and fold down on our tabletop. So I'm going to get my tabletop out and I'll show you exactly how we're going to put that on our tabletop here. All right, so I've attached some hinges to my leg assembly, and one thing you want to do for sure is make sure that those hinges are going to operate properly. When I put my first hinge on, I actually put it on backwards, so they need to fold completely flat like you see them. One other thing to note, for some reason, I've been doing woodworking for a long time, and I do use a fair number of hinges, but for whatever reason, I do not have a self-centering drill bit. And so you can see when we put these hinges on, I don't know if you can see it in the video very well, but these aren't really that square to the leg. And that's because I don't have that. If we had that square and then I was using that self-centering drill bit, it would give me a pilot hole dead center of my hole, and then my hinge could be nice and square. So that's why they're off a little bit. Now for this project, is it that serious? I don't think it's that serious, but it would be nice to have those perfectly square. Okay, so basically all we're going to do is flip this over so you can kind of see how that's going to operate, and we'll get this positioned exactly where it's supposed to be, and then these legs will open up like so. So our hinges are going to come to the inside. So remember when we were talking about our other shelf unit, that's why we wanted a full width fence picket so we could screw in our hinges here. So our legs, we want our legs to be right there on that 2-inch line. See that 2-inch line there? And then we'll go ahead and attach our hinges accordingly. Okay? And what I did, this is a pretty handy tool to have if you don't have it. I really like this one. It's the Craig Multi-Mark, and you can just set your ruler and then you can get your 2-inch reveals. I have it set to 1.5 inches right now, but then you can just scribe a line. So this is a pretty handy little tool for doing those types of markings. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my hinges now, and again I'm going to line this up so the outside of my leg, so I'm going to hold my leg vertically like it's supposed to be, position it right where it's supposed to be, and then attach my hinges accordingly. Okay, so let me go ahead and get that done, and then we'll move on. Okay, so now we have our leg and our hinges, so our leg will move up and down. And if we're doing a desk version or this auxiliary shelf version, either way, this leg is supported. Okay, so once we get all of the rest of our pieces on here, everything will make a bit more sense here. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to put in a bracket here that's ultimately going to hold our lower shelf. And so we're going to make the bracket, and then we'll show you exactly how we're going to attach it to our leg. This is not going to be a permanent install because we want our leg to be able to fold completely flat. So this bracket that we're putting on, we want to be able to take it on and off, and we want to do that so we could use it as a desk or as the auxiliary shelf, either way. Now, I do have a confession to make. Okay, when we were talking earlier, this desk or auxiliary shelf should have been at 30, but if you recall, I said to take off the 2 1/4 inch height of our caster, and we shouldn't have done that. We did want to take off the height of the thickness of our top shelf here, but we did not want to take off the caster. So what that means is from the top of our shelf to the bottom of our leg, this is at 28 1/4, and it shouldn't be. It should be really at 30. So for our purpose though, it's going to be just fine, but we are technically off that 2 1/4 inches that I told you to take off for the caster. We shouldn't have taken off. Okay, so we'll just have to make the adjustment. So at any rate, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the brackets that we're going to attach to our leg that's going to hold our lower shelf, and we're going to make the brackets that are going to hold this top and the lower shelf to that main unit. Okay, those brackets are all going to be the same. So we're going to do that using some scrap 2x. We've got a bunch of scrap 2x, treated 2x, and we're going to rip those down to 2 1/2 inches first. So let me just kind of get some stuff ripped up, and then I'll explain in more detail how all this is going to work. All right, so now we've got our blocks all cut and drilled out, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. So these I made 15 1/2 instead of 15 5/8, just because the scrap that I had happened to be 15 1/2. And what I've done here is 2 of these blocks are going to be the same. So we came off the front over 6 1/2 and in the back 3 1/2, and we drilled a 3/8 inch hole. And then on this block, which gets attached to our legs here, we came in 4 3/4, and then from the front edge we came in 3 1/8, and that should put us dead center of this front leg when it's all said and done. We'll see. So so we used a 3/8 inch drill bit. We're going to be using 5/16 inch bolts, so a little bit smaller bolt, but that will slide in and out of them holes nice and easy, and will attach with some wing nuts. Now we need to figure out exactly where we're going to place that, and this piece here is going to come in 4 inches, so I'm actually going to make a line at 4 inches. So it's going to go on here like this. Okay, that's how it's going to go on there with some bolts. We're going to use 4 1/2 inch bolts, and we still have to drill our holes in our legs to line up, but that's essentially how that one's going to go on there. Okay, so I have to take a bunch of dimensions here. Now I did go ahead and 45 that front edge on all of these. You wouldn't necessarily have to, but I did. So these 2 pieces will go on the side of our bar over there, and I'll get that position lined up over there as well. So I'll figure exactly where everything is going to be, and then I will come back and we'll discuss it in more detail, what I wound up doing with everything. All right, So that is our lower shelf cleat on our leg assembly. So we have 4.5 inch 5/16 inch bolts with a fender washer and a wing nut is what's going to hold that to that. Okay, so our shelf is going to sit on there. So from here to here is 5.5 inches. Okay, now when we go over to our bar, we need to set these at that same dimension of 5.5 inches from the ground. So I will show you how we're going to figure all that out here momentarily when we go over to the bar and get these put in place. All right, it's almost a moment of truth. I think I've got all this figured out, but I just wanted to show you this. So on the bottom there, you can see we have two 4.5 inch bolts. We went ahead and drilled through the side of our stand. And then on the back side, of course, we have our wing nuts and fender washers, okay? So what we had to do is on the bottom, the top of this cleat is 5.5 inches off the ground, just like it is on our legs. And then I had to make sure the top of this matched our legs. So I measured the legs, and that worked out to be 26 5/8. So off the ground, the top of this is also at 26 5/8. And our top and our shelf should fit just right, and it all should look level. Okay, now my ground here is somewhat level, but not perfectly level. So I have not tested this yet, so I'm gonna do that. And if it turns out, I'm gonna show you where we're at, okay? So let me go grab our other piece there and see what it looks like. All right, I do feel like we were successful in what we were looking to do. So now there is a couple more things that we have to do. We have to hold this top and this shelf in place. And so to do that, I think what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put 2 bolts with some wing nuts on either end over here. And then same thing here, we need 2 bolts also. So we have to be mindful that we're gonna miss screw locations, and we gotta be mindful that we're gonna hit our little standout cleats. But just look at that. It's gonna give us a lot more working area, display area, and it all folds down. Really, really simple to set up, which obviously when you're doing events and things, you want something that's gonna set up real simple. And if you look, you could see that the top is more or less flat. Now, if I was gonna really nitpick, does it look like that top should come up just a little bit? The base looks pretty good. The top does look like it's coming and going up at a slight angle. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get my tape measure, because like I said, this isn't really flat ground either. So I'm just gonna get my tape out and see exactly what the dimension is over here, what the dimension is over here, see how far. Like I said, the bottom looks pretty flat to the ground, but the top is really close too. So at any rate, that's it. So all I have left to do is figure out where I'm going to put those other pieces. We're going to use 3.5 inch 5/16 inch bolts, 3.5 inch with the washers and whatnot to put those together. Well, there is our finished unit. Now what I did here on the top is I just went ahead and came in 4 inches over 1.25 inches, drilled a 3/8 inch hole, Same thing on the bottom. And one thing about this auxiliary display shelf, it really it's very, very solid. You know, it doesn't look or feel like a piece of furniture that will knock down, but it will knock down just real quick. There are 6 bolts here on our auxiliary, and then there's 4 bolts that hold the cleats on, and then 4 bolts down here. So there's quite a few bolts that we do have to take apart, but that will enable this thing to fall down flat. But it really only take a few minutes to put back together. So there it is. And I definitely think this is something, we saw a lot of the bars, and now that we have this idea of the auxiliary table next to it, I definitely think we'll be selling more of these. One thing I did want to point out on the top here, we could have extended this cleat out farther, and then we could bring this top out deeper and have an overhang on the back side, so we could have, you know, utilize this as a desk with the shelf at the bottom as well. So that's just another idea to kind of expand on what we already got. So I hope you like this one. I hope you try it out, and more importantly, I hope you sell a bunch of them. Because the actual cost, you know, it did take me a little while on this one to figure everything out and do it all. But now that I've built one of them, I'm sure the next one will probably take half as much time. That's how it usually works out. So thanks for watching.